you're all in a shady place with a nice cool drink on this sweltering day. And welcome to the first Zero Carbon Yorkshire Community Energy Forum. It's great to see so many people here. There are a lot more people who are due to attend, so I will assume they will be joining us throughout. It seems that we have people joining us from the length and breadth of the country. So welcome to a virtual Yorkshire, everybody. My name's John. I'm a volunteer director at Zero Carbon Yorkshire. And I also do communications, research and events at Community Energy England. This is an organisation that exists to try and grow the community energy movement in England. So I wear both hats at this event. And this event is the first in what we hope to be a series of short, succinct and hopefully inspiring events, which will bring together experts from the region, from a whole range of organisations. We will hear from community energy groups, private companies, local authorities and a host of supportive organisations over the coming events. If these events prove to be useful, then we are keen to explore other ways we can grow a network of organisations who are interested in doing energy projects in the region. I do want to start this event by recognising, acknowledging that we are in the midst of a global pandemic. Thousands of people are losing their jobs and we're nose-diving into a recession. Everything is going to change. We hope by doing these events right now, the change will be maybe optimistically for the better, but we need to, we're all aware of the reality that we are living in. But today we have a positive smorgasbord of wisdom from the region who we've asked to discuss what opportunities they see in the near future for communities wanting to engage in energy projects. We're asking them to share lessons learned from their recent activities and to perhaps propose partnership opportunities. We don't want this to be another event that's talking about what has been done as such. We're more interested in what could be done. As we've recently reached 415 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, the most CO2 in the atmosphere that there's been for 15 million years. For context, it was 345 parts per million when I was born. Now is the time for us all to be innovating and creating these new projects. So to discuss how, as a region, we can take charge of these decarbonisation efforts, we have speakers from Northern Powergrid, York Community Energy, Energy Oasis and Solar for Schools. We'll welcome all those shortly. We hope to keep this event interactive, so please do pose your questions in the chat box and I will try to collate these and we'll ask questions at the end of the presentation. I may even ask you to ask the question yourself so that you can add a little bit of context. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Onda from Northern Powergrid. Northern Powergrid have recently launched a regional state of the sector report looking at community energy in their patch. We, Community Energy England, supported on this. And just today, I believe, Northern Powergrid launched a festival of innovation and ideas. So I'm sure Onda has a wealth of innovative ideas to discuss. So Onda, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for kindly inviting me to this virtual event today. And I think you've just made my presentation much easier by covering a couple of slides as well. So, so my name is Onda Baumerte. I'm Sustainability Manager at Northern Powergrid. And if Northern Powergrid needs an introduction, we're responsible for the electricity distribution in the Northeast, Yorkshire, and Northern Lincolnshire. So keeping your kettles boiling 24/7. And obviously, like John put it in so eloquently, reducing or keeping our greenhouse gas emissions under control is a massive challenge and also a massive opportunity. And to get to net zero, everyone needs to act and needs to act soon. And in Northern Powergrid, we believe that there is a definitely key role to play for community energy, as well as there is a key role for us to play in enabling that to happen in the region. Now, I have some slides for today as well, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen in just a little bit. But the slides are just to kind of provide you the links that will hopefully be shared later, and to illustrate some of the content that I'll be doing more updates verbally. So let me see if I can. John, if you could allow me to share my screen, please.
Sure. Either myself or Lucy who can do that. If Lucy can help, if I can't.
Thank you very much. I think I can do that now. And hopefully you can see that shortly, if not already. So I'm just going to dive right into it. And I'm going to share 3 things with you today. I'm going to share about a little bit of what we have done on the regional state of the sector report, and what we're planning to do in the future, and then how we can work together. So kind of those 3 key areas is what I'm trying to cover. So we serve 3.9 million homes and businesses, about a population of 8 million, as I mentioned earlier. And in the region, we have just about 20 community energy projects. And I'm diving right into the regional state of the sector report that has been just published. It interviewed and gathered the data from 20 organizations. We know there are more. We know there are some new and emerging groups as well. And the groups not already in the region do a variety of things, which extend beyond generation projects. There are sustainable transport groups or groups advising on energy efficiency, and so on. And there are more more interesting projects kind of joining those numbers. And hopefully you can still see my screen. So this is the report that we have just published, looking at what is the community energy in our region doing, what are the barriers, what are the opportunities thereof. So we've carried out this research to see, well, what is our starting position and how we can support community energy better in the future. So we have and obviously net zero and kind of from reducing emissions is something we always look at from the environmental perspective, but it is very much an economic issue. It's very much a social issue, and economically that ties in with the green recovery and how we can build back better after pandemic, and also how in that process we can take everybody along on that journey. And what we know, and this report illustrates perfectly, is how community groups deliver not only environmental or energy benefits locally to the communities they serve, they also bring social benefits and economic benefits, like creating jobs and alleviating fuel poverty. So this report is available from our website, like on this slide, a report we published early in the year, which sets out our community energy engagement strategy. So this is a document where we took a quite similar approach to the state of the sector. We had 17 community groups interviewed to see how we could provide support to them. And on the basis of that, we developed a 3-year strategy, which takes 26 different commitments, many of which have already been kind of completed and crossed off the list. And key amongst them is the action we are taking to amplify the voice of the local groups in the region whenever we're talking with Ofgem or responding to the government consultations and the like, because they are very engaged energy users, and they have a very clear view of what the future might bring and how the energy system needs to respond to that to enable more creative, interesting local things to happen and generate those local benefits. Again, this paper is available from our community energy website, which if you'd like to read it in more detail. We also took an action to organize local events and share quarterly newsletters, to which I will get to later on in my presentation. Enough about PDFs and kind of written reports. If you're looking for practical support, there are tools or opportunities that we can provide you to help you get started or to help you continue with your project. And I appreciate this might be of interest for some, but I'll quickly mention and run through all of them because they might be useful, and they're just really good to know. So firstly, if you're setting up and planning a project, whether it will be generation or whether it will be energy efficiency or demand of perhaps EV charging points, we have generation availability and demand availability heat maps, which give you that first view whether what the infrastructure is like in your local area. And obviously, you would normally follow that up by reaching out to us and can start more in detail, in-depth conversation with myself and our design engineers as a next step. But that gives you that first snapshot to see what it is like, and then we can look at it in more detail later on. And one of the means for doing that is either to reach out to your our community energy email, or also applying for connection surgeries. And you can book them online or directly by contacting us. So these are kind of one-to-one workshops to talk through your project and your proposals. And then finally, we have an auto design online tool, which has launched earlier this year. So that is a self-service tool when you would like to connect to the low voltage network. So what you do is you go online and enter your postcode, and you can see in a simple color scheme of red, amber, and green what the state of the infrastructure is in your local area, and also it generates a design and an automated design quote. So instead of going down the route of applying to us and getting the answer for up to 10 days, you can just do that in minutes and have a look online. So hopefully that's useful for things like electric vehicle charging points or other technologies. Now, we're interested how we can support community groups further, of course. And now is a key time in our business to engage with you and gather your feedback, as well as for ourselves as a company. All hands are on deck in drafting the plan for the next price control period. We're a regulated business, and we're regulated in certain intervals, and the next price control period is 5 years, to which we need to start devising our plans now and submit them to Ofgem for approval next year. So the next price control will run from 2023 and 2028, which would take us to kind of substantially on track or not on track to get to the net zero target. So every year in the future, of course, is very critical on whether and how we reach this target. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we need to engage with you early, and we need to start planning early for everything that we are able to do within this price control period. And generally, community energy and enabling regional decarbonisation is just one of the themes that we're looking at and planning for at the moment, although it ripples through all of the business plan areas. We've roughly divided the business plan into 11 different topics, and we'll be seeking further engagement on that. With specific, with community energy specifically in mind, we're also planning to set up a community energy stakeholder panel, which would advise us on the engagement and act as that expert group to test different proposals we're putting forward in the business plan and help shape that. So if you're interested in joining that, do email us, please, and I'll share the email in one of my next slides. Then finally, looking at things coming up, as John mentioned today, Innovation Festival started. This is an online festival which we're hosting for the first time, And there are many interesting themes where you can join and ask questions and listen into different innovation projects. Today, we shed a spotlight on Boston Spa energy efficiency trial, which looks to reduce voltage in the Boston Spa area to save customers money and save and avoid greenhouse gas emissions by reducing voltage and using smart meter data to do that in a half an hour interval, so close to real time. Very interesting stuff. And there are more projects that you can hear about during this week, which are to do with electric transport and resilience and other topics which might be relevant. So I'd encourage you to register, and some of, I think all of them will also be available on demand later on, so you will be able to listen in, even if you didn't attend. And we're also going to be hosting a community energy webinar. So hopefully delving into more detail on the themes that I've very quickly run through today, and discussing what are the next steps and how can Northern Powergrid support you. Being very mindful that between the time that we wrote our engagement strategy and now, the situation has changed drastically, and we need to adapt on and see how we change some of our actions or some of our approach in community energy engagement support, and really what are the next practical steps to take on that. So I mentioned getting in touch with us quite a bit, and the best way you can do that is by emailing the community energy inbox on this slide, and that will allow you to sign up for our quarterly newsletter. The next one is scheduled for this October. Also to express your interest if you'd like to join our stakeholder expert group, steering group, which would be great, and we'd really welcome your interest in that. Any other questions or thoughts, or let us know that you're setting up a project so we can start a conversation early and connect you with the right people, so you're talking with each other from the outset. And finally, there are more resources on the webpage, so please have a look. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amber. I'm really impressed with some of the tools and maps that Northern Powergrid has developed to help organisations get started and connect to the grid. Just a reminder, if you couldn't see that on the slide, if you want to get in touch with Northern Powergrid, either about new projects or taking part in the stakeholder panel, that's it. The email address was communityenergy@northernpowergrid.com. I would like to welcome everybody who's joined us since the event started. And I can remind people to keep asking questions in the chat box. We'll save these for a Q&A at the end. Getting a few questions coming in, both publicly and privately. So thank you very much for those. And now we're going to hear from Tom at York Community Energy. York Community Energy have been doing a lot of domestic retrofit projects recently. And I've also been assessing the feasibility of a whole manner of future projects. The guys at York Community Energy are passionate, knowledgeable, and it's great to introduce you to Tom.
All right, thanks, John. Thanks for that very flattering introduction. Am I able to share my screen, please?
We'll just make you a co-host. One moment, Tom. Lucy, if you can make Tom a co-host, please. I can't do that from this end. Thank you.
Drum roll, please.
Okay, perhaps slight technical hitch. Bear with us, Tom. If you can start, and then we'll make you the co-host as soon as possible.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so yeah, my name's Tom de Simone from York Community Energy, and not that you can see, but yeah, so the title of my talk today is Yorkshire 2030, Powered by the People. So I want to talk mainly about kind of the community aspect of community energy, and also give you a sort of rundown of what we've been doing and what we hope to do in the future. So York Community Energy is an independent volunteer-run charitable organisation established in 2015, and our goal is to help York generate and save energy, and just reduce the carbon footprint, basically. So I wanted to talk quickly about what we actually mean. How do we actually define community energy? Obviously, I don't want to dwell on it too long, because I presume most of you, having chosen to come here, probably already know. But just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page. So the kind of like the broad model of it is, somebody wants to create a sort of energy asset. So it could be something generating energy like solar panels, or it could be like battery storage or something like that. And then individuals invest in it via a community share offer. So the basic idea is that this energy asset creates some kind of revenue stream, and then that goes back to the investors, ideally with a sort of return on investment. And then crucially, the really interesting bit, as you're probably aware, is that then any surplus revenue after that can go into a community pot, and that can help fund all kinds of things. Might be local energy efficiency projects, so like LED lighting and insulation and that kind of thing. Could be materials and equipment for schools, or it could be a more sort of generic grant funding pots that community groups can apply to. So obviously at the moment, a lot of groups are looking at COVID-19 relief for community groups. In sort of normal times, then they might also be looking at fuel poverty. And apart from that, often it's just whatever people want to apply for, really. All kinds of weird and wonderful projects that wouldn't otherwise get funded kind of come out of the woodwork. So it's a great little scheme from that perspective. I was just going to mention Edinburgh Solar as an example. Not that you can see the picture on the screen, but yeah. So basically, Edinburgh Solar was started in 2016, and they decided to put solar panels on council-owned buildings across Edinburgh. So they created a sort of virtual solar farm, and they had solar panels on 24 different buildings with a generating capacity of 1.38 megawatts, which is enough to all right, okay. Which is enough to power about 250 homes. Right, hold on, I'll just share my screen. If you give me a moment. Okay, can you see that?
That's working, thanks.
Lovely. Right, sorry, I'll just move this a bit. Hopefully you can still see it. No, it says it's paused. Resume, there we go. Right, lovely. Can you see that okay again? Okay, so yes, excellent. Right. So yes, technical difficulties, we'll get there in the end. Yeah, so it powers about 250 homes, well, enough to power about 250 homes. Most of the energy from those solar panels is used on premises, so the buildings that host the solar panels are using the power, which is the kind of optimal thing financially. And that's enough to create a 5% annual rate of interest for investors. And they reckon that over the 20-year lifespan of the project, that'll put about £1 million into their community fund, which is quite impressive, really. Obviously, this was before the end of the feed-in tariff, so things have kind of changed slightly since then, but we'll get onto that later. So here's a question: why bother? Why bother at all with community energy? Why not just leave it to the big companies with their offshore wind turbines and all that kind of stuff? Well, I think personally that community energy offers a very offers a kind of richness to the landscape, and it means we can do more interesting projects. things that might have been overlooked otherwise, it's too small scale or a bit too experimental or whatever. In addition to that, it's an ethical investment choice. So if you've got some spare cash and you're looking to invest it, then you can do a lot worse than a small community group who's trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve the area where they live. And in addition to that, I think there's this idea of community building. So people come together to make the project happen. Have lots of meetings and get-togethers in the design stages, and see it all the way through to the actual deployment, and they then get to see they start to see energy being generated, and they see money and emissions being saved. It's really that shared sense of ownership, and I just think it really brings people together. So that's pretty special. And also there's this idea of I've put there building public support for the energy transition through education. And what I mean by that is, I think for most people, for the average person in their everyday life, energy supply is this kind of abstract concept. It's kind of, it doesn't really mean anything. And as long as they flick the switch and the lights come on, then they're not really bothered, how the energy gets there. And obviously, we have to kind of flip that on its head to help people understand, why we're doing this. Why are we making this huge transition, so much cost and expense? I think a lot of people just think, it's just a load of fuss over nothing. So, in sort of involving people in the process, they're kind of, building a connection with it firsthand, and they can really see how it affects them, and see what's involved in the whole process. And so, maybe once they've been through that process, they might be a bit more sympathetic to the cause. And of course, there are financial benefits, as Onda mentioned as well. So we've got this lovely infographic that Community Energy England did. I can't take any credit for it. But the key thing here, £4.6 million in local economic benefits last year from community energy. That's just in the UK. I think that's pretty amazing, really. And as we said, it's not just the economy, but it's all these small community groups as well who are benefiting from it. So it really is, it's all about people. So as I mentioned earlier, obviously we had this issue with the feed-in tariffs. So we're now operating in a post-feed-in tariff world. And what that means is that, it's just a bit more complicated and a bit more difficult to have a community energy project with the same kind of revenue, the same kind of income as we did before. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that we've got to work a lot harder to do it. So that was obviously a bit of a blow. And at York Community Energy, we were already kind of thinking about insulating homes and things like that. And this was kind of the push really to kind of lead us to start focusing more on that. So that's the kind of direction we've been going in recently. So we've created this initiative called Warmer Homes York. And so we've got a website and a section on the website where you can get sort of information, sort of handy guides about what to do in your own home. And the guides kind of broken up into different levels depending on your ambition. So, you might just want to do a little bit of draft proofing for not very much money, or you might want to go all the way to doing a deep retrofit. So we've got kind of different sections of the guide for different people. In addition to that, we've acquired a thermal imaging camera, and we've been going around people's houses looking for thermal leaks in their houses. That's been really interesting and something that people have been really excited about, and I'm really happy to have. We do a little report at the end of it, and they're always, very grateful, and very, kind of feedback we get is that it's very detailed and it's really made them see the house in a whole new light. So we've got an example here, and this is a particularly egregious one, but there was a gentleman who came to us and he said he's got some mold going on his bedroom ceiling. And he's recently had a loft conversion done. So we went in there with the thermal imaging camera, and sure enough, there's these huge rectangular cold spots on the ceiling where they've done the loft conversion, and then they've just not put any insulation back, which I think is pretty criminal personally, but there we go. But we always find, you know, little surprises like this in every house, and it's been a really interesting thing. We can only do it in the colder months of the year, so looking forward to doing it again this autumn and winter. Obviously, we'll have to take various precautions with the COVID situation, but yeah, really looking forward to doing that again. In addition to that, we've been going around with Andy Walker, who is an insulation professional based in Leeds, and he does whole house assessments. So he comes to your house and takes you around room by room and suggests various measures that you could install in your house to reduce your heating demand. So we've been kind of going around shadowing him and getting an idea of, you know, the kind of things that you can do to sort of basically just to give us more knowledge, really, and to help us in our goal to advise people. And on the subject of advising people, we recently held a draft proofing workshop. So this was just before lockdown started, and Carbon Co-op very kindly came and sort of gave us some training to do a draft proofing workshop, and then unleashed us on the general public the very same day. It went really well, actually, and it was, yeah, got a lot of good feedback. We've done one online since on Zoom as well, and we're hoping to do another one again soon. And the other thing we've been doing is what we're calling housewarming parties. So the idea is that, you know, you want to save a bit of money by doing a bit of DIY insulation. So Andy Walker, who I mentioned before, is kind of our guide for the day, and we assemble a team of volunteers to come round and do some DIY insulation under Andy's guidance. And so in this picture, we can see we insulated underneath a suspended timber floor. So it's kind of hanging this kind of wooden lattice from underneath the joists, and then you kind of fill the gap in between with mineral wool insulation. So that was really good. And then in addition to that, we've been doing all kinds of public engagements. Obviously, being a community group, that's what we're all about. So we've been doing stalls at some fairs. We've been along to quite a few of the climate strikes organised by the youth strikers, and so they've invited us to have a stall there. We quite often get involved with the climate lobby that's run every year by the Climate Coalition. We go down to London and get together with other constituents to lobby your MP about the climate. And then we've been hosting our own energy cafes as well, where we basically we get some speakers in to talk about certain subjects, and then afterwards everybody kind of splits off into groups and discusses those subjects in a bit more detail. So they've been quite popular as well. So what about the future of community energy? Because that's what we're all here for today. So, you know, with the feed-in tariffs going away, I think we have to become more creative. So we're going to see a lot more innovative projects. We're already seeing quite a few, more kind of, you know, experimental in nature. There's a lot of stuff to do with storage now, and flexibility, demand-side response. So, you know, the idea of you can, if you have, say, like a battery, then you can take energy off the grid cheaply at times when there's lots of surplus renewable energy, and then you can sell it back to the grid later when it's needed. So it's, you know, decarbonising the grid and generating some revenue. There's electric car charging, so people, you know, paying to use a community-owned electric car charger. Renewable heating, so thinking about, you know, installing heat pumps in community buildings and swimming pools. Community microgrids, so you've got this idea now, you can have neighbourhoods where some people have got solar panels and batteries and things, and they're all kind of trading energy among each other and sort of buying from one neighbour and selling to another neighbour, that kind of thing. And of course, you know, we still want to see some straightforward community-owned renewable energy generation, and it's, you know, we're just kind of have to work a bit harder at the business models, basically. So, you know, all these things we would love to see happening in Yorkshire, and we'd love to be involved with if anyone is interested in partnering on any of these projects. Obviously, you know, the future now is going to be multi-stakeholder, and a lot of these people here today, as John said, you know, we've got DNO, DSO, community groups like us, technical partners, local authorities, councils and things. You know, we all need to work together to make this happen. And generally, we just want to see more community energy groups in Yorkshire, really. So, you know, if you're here today and you're thinking of starting one, then get in touch and, you know, maybe we can help you get started. I just want to really briefly mention this as well, which I saw today. So Bradford Community Energy, they've just started up as a community energy company. They've got a share offer ongoing at the moment. I think it's only got a few days left to run, but they're looking to buy 2 lots of solar panels that are already installed on community buildings, and then kind of so just charge the community groups the actual energy costs. So that's going to help them out financially. And they're looking to install a heat pump as well, quite a large ground source heat pump. So if you do have some spare cash to invest, you might want to look at them. Like I say, only a few days left on their share offer, but it's, yeah, really exciting to see new groups popping up. So I really hope they do well. Yeah, and I think that's it from me, really. So thanks very much for your time. And yeah, I'd be really interested in hearing about any partnership opportunities. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tom. I couldn't agree with you more on points about the richness of options for community energy that it offers, the avenues it creates for innovation in the energy system. Never mind the ability to give people local investments in a green future. And thanks for the shout out to Bradford Community Energy. You've taken the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, I'm wishing those guys all the best. I think Carlton signed up to be here. He may be. Also, I'm going to ask all speakers to share their slides, but the guide that you've written sounds like a great asset to potentially share with people in the region. Now, everyone, a friendly reminder to keep hydrated because it is hot today. And now, over to Mike from Energy Oasis, a business located in Harrogate, where I grew up. And Energy Oasis, they design bespoke energy installations that integrate the most cutting-edge and appropriate technologies. I've had some great conversations with Mike recently, where he's been telling me about some amazing projects he's done working with local authorities, and he has some well thought out inspirations for taking rural communities off grid. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, John. And I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for attending this Zoom call on a really hot day in August. Yeah, it's good that you've taken a couple of hours out of your day just to sit inside and hopefully, you know, get away from the sun. I'm the managing director of Energy Oasis. I set the business up 6 years ago because I fundamentally wanted to be able to change the way that people looked at the way they consume energy and also the way they create energy. So I've had about 20 years in the renewable marketplace. I've worked in just about every aspect of energy creation, so large-scale wind, solar, anaerobic digestion, biomass, and storage. So when we started the business, my objective for the business was to basically look at an area or a site and reduce the energy as far as we could using smart technology and controls, and then create the energy that we required at that site. And I was born and brought up in North Yorkshire. I come from an agricultural background. I'm very hands-on, and my goal was to basically facilitate as many rural communities becoming off-grid as possible. So as a business, when I started the business, I wanted to create an energy cooperative, but I found that was kind of tough 6 years ago, and we needed to make money, so we became a limited company. And as a business, we have sort of 2 client bases. So our largest client base commercially is Norsk Hydro, the biggest aluminium manufacturer in the world. And our projects with them is to reduce their consumption and create the power they require within the United Kingdom. So that's about somewhere in the region of 15 megawatts of electricity a year. And we're going to be taking all of their sites off grid by the end of 2022. So that's the big stuff that we do. On the smaller stuff that we do, which is where my main passion is, we are now looking at taking 2 villages completely off grid. And we are a technology agnostic company. I'm fortunate enough to have been able to work with lots of different technologies, so I understand how they all work. And I also want to make sure that things are sustainable for the future. So we're fortunate that we have a very strong team within the business with a lot of experience. So we basically look at a village. So the ones that we're working with at the moment are just outside Malton in North Yorkshire. We've been chatting to the DNO to get some feedback from those guys. And we're looking at effectively putting in a small-scale anaerobic digester, 4 small-scale wind turbines, about 150 kilowatts of solar, a small hydrogen storage device, and a saltwater battery. So as a business, I think it's really, a lot of people are talking about energy storage at the moment and EV. And I feel like everybody's sort of rushing down a certain path. My personal view on batteries is that they should be as eco-friendly as possible. So saltwater flow batteries are eco-friendly. Lithium ion is not. Hydrogen is the storage medium of the future. You know, why would you buy an electric car with a battery when you can have an electric car with a fuel cell and you can generate that power locally? So those are the things that sort of really engage us as a business. We work with quite a number of local authorities. So our most recent project we delivered for Harrogate Borough Council was an underground car park. We saved the energy consumption in there by 72%. So in pounds and shillings, we took them from £45,000 a year in electricity spend down to 10. I'm trying to persuade them at the moment to set up a community energy fund where an aspect of that saving goes into a community energy company for the Harrogate area, so we can do other projects and fund them in that way. But local authorities are slowly waking up to the idea that they can actually become power hubs, as can communities. So as a business, we're very much focused on community ownership, about providing secure energy within the communities that we work with, and also providing opportunities for employment with those communities. Because once you've got those aspects nailed down, it gives those communities the opportunity to grow and develop other things. So as a business, we're very, very focused on being able to deliver, you know, structured, well thought through community assets that reduce the carbon within the local environment and create energy and heat security. I don't have any slides, I'm afraid, because I'm not that sort of a guy. I'm sure there's somebody within our organisation who would love to pull them together, but we tend to, you know, demonstrate on delivering real objectives within these environments that we work. And we also have access to lots and lots of funding, which is really nice. So lots of local authorities facing the corona pandemic and wondering how on earth they're going to cope when they come out of it. We've also got within the Yorkshire area the decentralisation of the local different councils. So that, you know, my biggest fear at the moment is that in 2 years' time we're going to have this devolved Yorkshire, and all of these guys that are in these positions of decision making are going to spend the next 2 years looking after their jobs potentially, but they won't actually get anything done. So I think it's really important for people within the Yorkshire region now, if you've got projects that you want to put on the table and deliver, you need to get them in. You need to start pushing that process, because if you don't get it sort of sorted and into somebody's head before January, it's a very strong possibility that a lot of these projects are going to get delayed, and we really don't have the opportunity to get delayed with this. As I said, there's lots of funding available to local authorities. It's interest free. They just don't know how to apply for it. So the community solar schemes, something that Tom alluded to earlier, once the feed-in tariff has been removed, you know, how do you make those schemes viable? Well, it's around maths and common sense, and it's about being able to invest for long-term returns on a reasonable interest rate and return. And a community energy scheme has the ability to deliver all of that. And when you start looking at your local communities, such as your local school, your local sports hall, you look at the environment that you're in. So if you're in North Yorkshire, you'll invariably, if you're in a village, you'll be near a river or a farm. You know, we've got plenty of wind. We've got a reasonable amount of sun, quite a lot at the moment. But, you know, as we get more and more global warming, which is unfortunate, our climate is going to change, and we will have more sun. And having the ability to be able to harness different technologies is the key to giving you that energy security. You know, we know that we can create energy 24/7 from anything from 50 kilowatts up to 24 meg. You know, we've delivered that, so we know we can do it. So the difficult thing now is to get everybody on board and engaged, and to really start pushing these community schemes. So if you're on a parish council, if you're in a village and you've got a river with a weir next to it that the Environment Agency has let fall down, you know, all of these things we can get involved with, we can address, and we can start creating power. It's nice to have Anda on. We've never actually met before, but hello, Anda. The DNO have in the past not always been as supportive as we would like, but I know that they are changing slowly, and hopefully Andrew will be pushing them down that road. But there's an opportunity where you can literally come off grid. You can buy the grid around your village or your industrial estate, and you can then manage that. And the DNO are there to facilitate that. If we all got a ground source heat pump at the moment and an EV charging point, the upgrade in the grid would be significant. And that's not always the best way to spend a piece of money. So it's about looking at projects in the round. You know, we throw an awful lot of food away in this country, but there are very, very few anaerobic digesters. And the reason for that is that the ones that we've got are normally located a long way away from anywhere, and they're very, very big. But there's nothing to stop you having a very small anaerobic digester serving a community. We've done a project about 3 years ago where we put one in the community, and the community had a microbrewery there, so we were chucking the yeast waste into that rather than making Marmite. And the village was putting in their green waste, lawn clippings, etc. That AD plant's been running, ticking along now for 4 years with no real problems, apart from when we have to obviously take it down to service it twice a year. But by putting in small-scale wind and solar, we've been able to alleviate that downtime, so it doesn't impact on the community we're creating the power for. So all of this stuff is absolutely doable. You know, in terms of hydrogen, we've got Green 21. I don't know how many of you know about that, but everybody keeps saying to me, you know, we're all going to have gas-free homes. Gas, you know, we're no longer going to be using gas. Well, let me help you. That is a myth. Green 21 is about taking the methane that we get from the North Sea, taking the carbon out of it, storing that in the old gas grid under the North Sea. So there's our carbon capture. And by 2030, from Hull up to Berwick-on-Tweed, that whole gas grid will be running on hydrogen. So the gas is not going to go away, and there's nothing wrong with hydrogen gas. It's a very clean, sustainable energy. ITM Power in Sheffield are the world leaders in hydrogen electrolyzers. You know, they're producing product and putting it in all over Germany, all over North America, and slowly we're starting to put it in this country, but it's far too slow. So every large project that we're involved with has got a hydrogen electrolyzer on it, because the fuel of the future is going to be hydrogen. Lithium-ion batteries are just not sustainable. Lead-acid batteries are not sustainable. Chemical batteries are not sustainable. You know, how are you going to recycle these things? You've got to think of the lifetime cost. So let's sort of really focus. As I say, we've got until January, really, before this whole devolution thing kicks in. So you need to identify your projects. You know, if you've got a school and you've got a local community, we can turn the school into an energy hub. Literally turn it into an energy hub. If you've got a big playing field and a big sports hall or a tennis club or a hockey club or a rugby club, you know, at the moment, these organisations are going through quite a bit of financial difficulty because of COVID. Well, let's take some of those aspects of those sites and once again create an energy hub that will feed the local community. If you're going to invest money, why have £20,000 in an ISA getting 0.2% when you could put £20,000 into your local village hall or your local school or your local industrial estate and get a return of 3%? And you're saving a whole ton of carbon. So why don't, you know, the future, I see the future as a really bright thing in Yorkshire, really bright. But we've just got to start pushing buttons. People have got to really lobby their local politicians, their local councillors. They've got to get them out of this tender trap where they, you know, the tender for mediocrity. Tendering, in all honesty, is about a group of people who may not have the best skills about the subject that they're writing a tender about, to create a document that they then put out to give to the middle of the road provider. And we've all seen where that leads. So when we first started the business, we never won any tenders, and we still don't. We won't do a tender. I won't respond to a tender. And the reason for that is the technologies that we use are expensive, but they're really reliable. So our LED lights that we have made in this country have been made in this country for over 12 years. They have a 0.1% failure rate, and every single one of them comes with its own daylight harvesting, its own PIR or microwave. They turn themselves on and off. So the energy savings that we achieve are significant. But if you're in a tendering process, we wouldn't even get the gig because we're too expensive, because they don't look at the lifetime value. And that's to
wrap up shortly, Mike.
Sorry.
We're very close on time. Thank you. You done?
Yeah, so my advice to you is, you know, if you want to make a difference, now's a really good time to do it. Lobby your local parliament, lobby your local councillors. If you've got a project that you're thinking about, really kick it on, get it on now. And that's all I'd like to say. You know, we're here to help as a business.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mike. Those savings you made for Harrogate Council are incredible, and it's exactly these sorts of initiatives that we need to demonstrate to local authorities to create strong and effective partnerships. And yes, the tender trap is a difficult hurdle to get over. We are seeing some interesting ways around this, particularly from Plymouth and Bristol Council. And I could certainly feel some sharp intakes of breath at the notion of off-grid. I feel we could have a whole day event on this on its own. But I'll ask you a few more details about that in the Q&A. And our last speaker for this event is Shannon Jackson from Solar for Schools. They have installed over 14,500 solar panels on 157 schools, which has resulted in over 76,500 children being exposed to and hopefully understanding what solar panels can do. And schools are often the very centre of a community and very much demonstrate that perfect bell curve for energy demand during the day. And the solar panels can supply that. So Shannon, thanks for joining us, and over to you.
Thanks very much, John. I've got a presentation to share. If I could be given the power to share my screen, if that's okay. It's lovely to be here, and thank you for making the space, and thank you for everyone that's given presentations so far. It's been fascinating, so thank you.
You're welcome, Shannon. Thank you. I believe you have the power.
Yes. Okay. Let's try it then. Okay. So. Is that working? Is tech doing okay?
It's coming, but slowly.
Okay. Is that up now?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Yeah, so thank you for having me, John. It's absolutely lovely, and you've done a wonderful introduction to Solar for Schools. So yes, I would just the first thing that I'd like to say is that we are, I guess, what we say on the tin. We just do solar PV, and we just do schools, but we've had a lot of success in the sector to date. And I didn't know how much people knew about us, so I've done a bit of kind of an introduction to the organisation and how it works, and also kind of trying to touch on this theme of how collaboration is very much at the centre of what we have done, but also what we continue to do, and potentially some ideas of how we could work with different stakeholders. Because you mentioned that there were kind of local authorities, businesses, community organisations, volunteers, things like that, other community benefit societies. So I've tried to cater for a whole host. So please let me know if there's anything that's not quite clear. You can pop it in the chat, and I'm happy to address after. Really happy to be here. Just wanted to point out the picture on the opening slide is from my hometown of Todmorden in the Calder Valley. So really excited to see community energy growing in Yorkshire, and very much aligned with that, and hoping that Solar for Schools can do our absolute best to support others and to keep the success going. So we'll just do a bit of a introduction to us, people that, there we go. So we're a bit of, so John did a quick introduction, and we've got kind of, I'm coming at the presentation with, I guess, two hats. So John mentioned about 150 schools that we work with, and that is true. So the Solar for Schools as an entity involves two different organisations. One of them is the Solar for Schools Community Benefit Society, which is, I guess, a big version of a local community energy group, in the sense that it's nationwide, so we're not tied to a local area. We set up in 2015 with the mission to support any school that came to us to be able to get solar PV at no cost other than what it would pay for using the clean energy. So there's no costs involved in terms of any capital going into the panels or any long-term looking after them. And then what we've tried to do is think long-term as well, and think about students. And so we integrate our program with long-term education. So that includes workshops, assemblies, and then our website as well, which is very much focused on kind of independent student learning as well, and involves things like data graphs, as you can see here. So the Community Benefit Society is kind of the not-for-profit organisation that is at the heart of what we do in the UK, and that works with currently 67 schools that we've helped since 2015, mixture of governance, and yeah, this is how many tons of carbon all that collaboration has saved, and how many students we've got to work with in the process. So that is the Community Benefit Society, and that's what people usually think of when they think of Solar for Schools. We also have a second hat that I'm coming with today, and a less well-known partner, which is Solar Options for Schools, and this is the kind of bigger partner that we work with, that has the 150 schools, and that is an integrated kind of digital platform partner. So what they're trying to do is they work with our Community Benefit Society, which is UK based, and Solar Options for Schools is based internationally. So they're based not only in the UK, but they've got schools in Germany, in India, in Spain, and in New Zealand now that was in 2019. And what they're trying to do is they have worked with our Community Benefit Society and the others in the other countries to maximise scale. So they use a lot of the functions which I'll go into, and how we develop projects is through our website and an online platform, and that's allowed us kind of the success that we've had to date. Just move on the slides. So basically the message kind of here that I wanted to pass on is that collaboration is internally at the heart of what we do. We've never been one organisation, but we've always worked collaboratively between Options and the Community Benefit Society to kind of maximise the amount of schools that are going solar, with the Community Benefit Society being focused in the UK. Just in terms of how that looks for a school project, and how that partnership looks. What we try to do is integrated Options' ability to use its digital platform to, as I said, like maximise scale and ease. So when we kind of look at developing solar projects, the website, we've got an online website which allows you to search any school in the UK, and it's got its own profile page, and then we work to assess the project viability. So this is, each project page has its own kind of profile, and that includes you're just going backwards. And that includes a tool that we've called the panelizer. So this is the panelizer in action. And it allows you to kind of map out the roof capacity of a system, but also through the website, you can input a lot of the electricity data that you need, kind of how much electricity the school's consuming, what mains price they're currently paying. And that allows us to, once we've kind of found a school or a group of schools that we want to work with through the website, to really easily assess which projects look viable and which ones might need a bit of additional funding. And the great thing about that is it's all open source. So, sorry, I'm just going backwards. This is where tech. So the great thing about that is it's all open source. So through our website, once we've looked at the viability, that's open to the school itself. So they can get an idea on the financial savings that are possible and the carbon savings that are possible with different system sizes. And we work with schools to basically give them the best system size for those financial and carbon benefits. We then work to install. And then we move into, I guess, the more unique part of our project, which is around the long-term student education. So this is from one of our schools up in Durham. And this is a workshop led by our Head of Education, Sarah. So we work with our schools for 25 years and we do workshops and assemblies, as well as offer like lots of online support for that time period. So the idea is that we want to focus on empowering a generation to understand what clean energy is and linking it to tackling climate change, tackling carbon reduction. And the great thing about mixing that with having solar projects is that it makes the whole idea of clean energy a lot more tangible for a student. So you can kind of point to the roof and show them how a solar panel works and work through that process. And it's been shown to increase kind of depth of learning and student curiosity and engagement. So that's the reason for mixing the two. And the final thing that we do is we also do that whole long-term process of looking after solar panels on the school's behalf. So it's the Community Benefit Society, Solar for Schools, that owns the solar system, and that means that it's responsible for looking after, making sure that everything's working okay, making sure that if anything goes wrong, it's fixed. And so the idea is that the Community Benefit Society not only funds the initial kind of installation and the education that's integrated with that, but that also we're thinking long term about how do we minimise the school needing to take on any risks or costs. So the schools have no cost within the programme, and they don't have to look after anything. It's all with the Community Benefit Society. And again, what we're looking to do here is think long term, think about student engagement. So on our website, we monitor the systems, but we also provide visual graphs of the data. So every 15 minutes, our solar systems send data about generation and consumption, about how much they're exporting, and it allows us to kind of tally what an individual school is doing. So we provide this to schools with a login, and this allows students and staff, as well as anyone that wants to have a look at a particular school that we've worked with, to then engage with kind of what's happening for a school. And we do this to maximise curiosity and interest in clean energy in the long term with students. So just to kind of summarise that, the Solar for Schools programme is, this is kind of what we're aiming for. So the Community Benefit Society is an organisation that is run by schools for schools. And when I say by schools, what I mean is that it's the cooperative-like structure. So the uniqueness of it is that it's not for profit, but more uniquely within the cooperative structure, it's not the funders that are our members and the ones that we are trying to maximise benefit for, but it's our solar schools themselves. So once the school goes through the programme, they become members of the Community Benefit Society, and what that does is it gives schools democratic control over their projects. So they are in charge of kind of how the programme runs, how the organisation runs and what it does, and it also gives them an additional financial benefit in solar can not only save them money for reducing energy costs, but it also can bring back profit as well. So because they are the members of the Community Benefit Society, any profit within their project goes directly back to the school, not to the Community Benefit Society. So it's an organisation run by schools for schools. The second thing is that we're looking for a 25-year peace of mind programme. So all of the solar price that we offer to schools for using the clean energy is we try and offer it at lower the mains price. Obviously with FIT ending and the export subsidies ending, that becomes harder, and that's why collaboration is really important. But what we do is we secure that for a school for a 25-year period, so it rises only with inflation, and that's trying to guarantee maximum long-term savings for a school, so they're protected from rising energy costs. And the other thing is what I mentioned before about that full maintenance cover, which is sorted by the Community Benefit Society in terms of responsibilities and costs. So schools don't have any responsibilities in that, so they can just enjoy using clean energy and the education that is integrated with it. Yeah, and the final thing is just making sure that we're thinking long-term, integrating education, and within that, you know, within the kind of sustainability education sector, there's a big focus on online platforms and online engagement and offering tools and professional training days as well, focusing on upskilling staff to deliver sustainability education. But one of the basis that we go on is we also offer those things, but our education really centres on offering externally delivered workshops. So we do that through our in-house team, but we also have a partner of local UK educators to deliver that locally in community. So they're working with educators that they know. And obviously the benefits there are that schools don't have to, schools and staff don't have to take on any additional responsibilities to educate their students, which is really hard. Not a lot of them are necessarily confident in that area. And it also, local councils we're finding are very interested in that because it's an added benefit for local job creation as well. So that's kind of a summary of our programme. And in terms of the kind of collaboration, the collaboration thing that John was focusing on and that we're looking to promote throughout, the main lesson in the success that we've had so far is that collaboration has been absolutely key. So I've mentioned that internally we are two entities joined together to maximise scale, but we've had to work with loads of different partners to work with the schools that we've had to date in the UK that are our partners now. And that includes councils, it also includes individual schools and academy trusts, it includes dioceses, so the church is running groups of schools, and it includes city councils and as well. So there's a real diversity of partners that we work with and that we are looking to continue working with as well, particularly as we move forward to equalising clean energy access for schools in the north. So just the final thing I wanted to touch on was what could collaboration with Solar for Schools look like for different UK partners. So I've just given 3 examples of potentials, which I hope make it a bit more tangible as an idea. And I've done it in case studies because I think that's obviously often quite a good way of communicating potential. So one of our first case studies, and I thought this was most relevant to kind of community action groups, climate groups, or just people wanting to help their local area. It doesn't have to be groups, you can also be individuals. It's also relevant for other community energy groups who are looking to develop projects themselves and to work through that process. And I thought it's also relevant for businesses and maybe people who are looking to get involved more in the funding side of things, because a lot of schools in the north actually need additional funding within projects as well. So I just wanted to talk.
I was going to ask if you can wrap up after this case. We're against the clock, and I think it's really important we keep these things to time.
Yeah, of course. Okay, not a problem. Yeah, so the case study is Otley All Saints Primary School. This was a school that we took solar just this year, and we worked with Otley Energy Community Benefit Society to deliver that project. And the kind of background to it was that Otley Energy had formed really recently, so they were a startup with no real capacity to fund projects. They wanted to do a community share offer, but they didn't have the the skills or expertise to do that. I didn't know what they were doing in that area. And also when they were trying to deliver the project, the diocese that runs the school, the landlord of the school, and the council didn't want to support the terms and conditions that they were able to offer because there was too much risk placed on the school. So what they did was they came to Solar for Schools. We provided the funding, we managed the project, and we offered our terms and conditions, and it allowed the community project to go ahead. And what we've done is that when Otley Community Benefit Society would like to take over ownership of the solar panels, they can do, and it gives them a bit of time to develop that process as well. The partnership benefits with that were that we were able to deliver on community ambition. The council and the school were protected in getting very strong terms and conditions that didn't put risks on school. And the great thing about this was it actually provided the first project to really mobilise support for the Otley 2030 project, which is the community project around securing a sustainable future. And because it started with the school, it really mobilised a lot of people to get behind the project and to know about the project. So the council was also involved, didn't need to provide any funding for the project, but we're looking into areas where they could. So it really brought everyone together. So I will just finish on that because of time. The main message that I wanted to pass on was that collaboration is at the heart of what we've done, and we are looking to do that with more as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shannon. Great to hear and see how such a prolific organisation makes these projects work, and to hear about the educational aspect. Education is obviously such a huge part of future solutions to the problems that we face. So now we're going to have a very rapid fire Q&A. I'm really keen to keep these events as short, succinct and snappy as possible. Before I do that, I'm just going to very quickly raise the idea posed by Kaye about local authority pension funds investing in renewable energy schemes. This is absolutely something that is being explored. Community Energy England would be tentatively looking into this. The amounts of money potentially available will make your knees wobble, but understanding how some of these pension pots approach risk needs a lot of work. There's certainly a lot of metrics that need reporting, and we're not sure that the projects that would be able to access these funds can necessarily report on these risk profiles. But we are speaking to appropriate organisations in the future. There's also big questions about what stake in a community-owned organisation would be appropriate for a pension pot to be owning. So, going to try and keep this as quickly as possible. We've got 15 minutes-ish. I'm going to start with a question for Anda from Debbie Trebilco, who unfortunately has had to leave, but she always puts forward some fantastic questions. That being, when the stakeholder panel has completed and the feedback is over, will Northern Powergrid be investing in copper to allow for more EV chargers and heat pumps in the challenged parts of their network? And will there be any reduction of voltage on the grid to enable more connections?
Thank you. It is a good question on how do you actually build adequate infrastructure for all the current and future needs, isn't it? So I think it's key to say that when we look at different pathways to net zero, whether it's electricity or hydrogen or a kind of more flexible world or less, where we're changing our practices or not, all of it and any of those pathways will require further investment. What type of investment and what infrastructure and what technologies, that I think is up for a debate still. When it comes to electricity infrastructure, we know there's going to be increased demand without doubt, and how much it's going to increase, again, we are going to see in the future. So currently we do modeling and we do stakeholder engagement to see what that uncertainty might look like. And we know that there is going to be less requirement for infrastructure or investment in infrastructure if the system changes evolve, the customer energy practices change significantly, and have more flexibility. So what I mean by flexibility, there are two types. One would be the customer flexibility, which would be, say, smart charging in electric vehicles, adjusting our energy consumption to match the renewable generation peak, and so on. So those would be kind of market facilitated tariff, impacted by market tariffs, which we don't have a control of, types of flexibility. There are more, so these are just a few examples. The other type is the network flexibility, and what can we do with our network to facilitate more kind of local distributed network and system. And one of them, for example, would be the voltage reduction that Debbie has mentioned in her question as well. So we have been reducing voltages to our substations starting from at least 2016, where we can, and that has generated 4.2 gigawatt headroom for renewable generation to date, and we're continuing doing this. The Boston Star project is something that we're looking at whether and how we could use smart meter data to do that on a local scale in domestic properties. So quite specific, a bit different to what we can do with our infrastructure. But then obviously we can only flex our demand or generation to an extent. And there will be a requirement for more infrastructure in certain areas. I think broadly it will depend which area it is and what the future might look like. But we are committed to use the existing assets as much as we can to make sure that most of the customers benefit, not only from efficient use of infrastructure, but also from lower cost. But there will be cases where investing in infrastructure might be better meeting customer needs, and also might be lower cost. So we'll obviously, as a last resort, we will be investing in that infrastructure. I think it's really important for me to say as well that currently the way we're regulated is only on a cost efficiency basis, and we can't invest ahead of need. We need to invest just in infrastructure, which we do every year, by the way, with quite considerably. We need to invest just before that need or requirement arises to avoid the risk that some project is not going to go ahead, and all of our customers, including vulnerable and customers with low incomes, would pay for that infrastructure. But to get to net zero will probably involve some investment ahead of need to facilitate that smooth pathway or for us to get there. So it's quite a complex area, and we're looking to engage with our wider stakeholders more on this and what their priorities are and how we can enable different areas of our network decarbonize at different speeds. Some of them are aiming for net zero by 2030, by the way, and how we can make sure that it doesn't disadvantage other customers. It's an excellent question, and apologize for the length of my answer because it's quite a complex area.
No doubt it is, but thank you for keeping it as succinct for the complex area that it is. Frank Colenso asked about how to contact Northern Powergrid with regards to connections. I believe that was community energy at northernpowergrid.org. Is that right?
Sorry, I've lost my mute button. Yes, that community energy at northernpowergrid.com is one option. You can contact us. There is a separate email for connections, but do email us on either.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to Mike. So, Mike, I dare say there's lots of people who are interested in what you mean about taking villages off grid. Can you elaborate on this a little bit? With there being so many rural communities in Yorkshire, like how feasible is this? How on earth is this going to work? In 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. Well, in 2 minutes. So basically, if you let's make some assumptions. Each house in the UK uses somewhere between 4 and 6 kilowatts of electricity. If you're in a rural location, you're going to be heating your house typically with LPG or kerosene. So in terms of we would, in terms of the heating, we would look at doing a district heating network for the houses. So we would work with the parish council, the local landowners and the local homeowners, and we'd basically put a heat ring in to create the heat, and we'd create a community heat scheme. What would be in that heat scheme? Well, if you've got a big dairy farm at one end of the village, you've got land where we can put in small scale wind, we can put in small scale solar, we can put in AD, and potentially maybe something like heat pumps. So we understand how to model that load. We create the load generation that we require for that area, and we then effectively engage each household to become a member of that scheme. We fund the schemes in the first instance so we can make them happen and we make them work. And then when the community is confident that they know what they're buying into, we effectively sell them the scheme. So that's how it works. When you ask how realistic is it, every single rural village in North Yorkshire can come off the grid. You know, and the point that Anders making is a very good point. The grid's in sort of an ambiguous situation. They've got to be able to provide power to large businesses, large users, you know, and cities. But in terms of rural communities, there's a lot of rural communities that have got, you know, a single split phase supply. It's not really adequate for the village. And for Northern Powergrid to be able to commit the investment that's required to upgrade them to something that's required could cost, you know, anywhere from 200,000 to a couple of million. So the communities can't afford that. But the actual grid infrastructure within the village is perfectly suitable for what they require. So if you can create the additional generation within that local community, taking a village off grid is relatively straightforward. It's maths and common sense.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mike. Quick question for Tom, for Mike Colenso. Will it be able to provide, keen to meet up to support and provide a little bit of support for Project Purple in Hubingham?
Yeah, definitely. So I think probably the first step is I will send you my email address, and we can arrange, I think if we sort of arrange a phone call or Zoom call or something, and we can take it from there. That's probably the best way forward, I imagine. But yeah, happy to be involved and offer any help we can.
Fantastic. And Tom, can you just give a little bit more information, quickly as possible, on what you mean about a housewarming party, what this entails, and how organisations might be able to do similar?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on it briefly in the slides, but it's the basic idea of sort of teaching people to do DIY insulation in their own house, and sort of getting a group of volunteers around, or you can bring friends and family around as well potentially, and it's just going through that process of the installation with an expert there sort of guiding you along. So you know it's not suitable for all kinds of insulation measures, but the ones which are, you know, feasibly DIYable we can do. And so you're basically just paying for the materials and maybe a bit of a fee to, you know, someone like our expert Andy, who kind of does the guidance. And really it's about, well, it's about saving money and sort of empowering you to do it yourself, but B, it's also about then those people becoming kind of advocates themselves and being able to, you know, tell their friends and family about it, and maybe organizing another housewarming party in their house, and, you know, kind of spreading it that way. So it's really about saving money, because, you know, retrofit can get very expensive. So saving money and sort of helping people skill up and just spreading the message, really.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tom. So question for Shannon from KB. I'm going to assume that's Kit from York Community Energy. With regards to the lack of fits, and does that now make it difficult to have a financially viable PV on school roofs? But particularly in the north of England, as we have less solar radiation compared to down south, and a lot of these models are designed perhaps more with the south in mind. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, please, Shannon?
Of course, John. Thank you, and thank you, KB, for asking the question. The short answer is absolutely, it does, and particularly so in the north, like you said, where the irradiation, the kind of sunlight, we're just less gifted in that way. But I actually think it's a really good opportunity, particularly for looking at collaborations, because one of the other partnerships that I was going to mention is increasingly working with councils and also community groups. And I think the funding, making the financial model work, is a great way of kind of bringing those groups together. In particular, around the model that we were using under FIT was community investment. We use community bonds rather than shares, which repay our investors at 5%, and that becomes very hard when the FIT moves away. So increasingly, we need additional funding for school projects. The great thing around that is collaboration with community groups. In terms of finding that additional fundraising, it's a lot easier to do for a school, which tends to have a lot of stakeholders around it, tends to be really central in the community, a really good kind of community mobilisation. So we're working increasingly with volunteers and with community groups to find additional funding where we need it, and it's actually becoming a really good way of mobilising community around solar, and an easy first project as well. So that's kind of one option. And the other thing is working with councils. So a lot of councils, although it's hard after kind of COVID and taking on more financial burdens, but a lot of councils have access to cheaper capital with kind of public loans borrowing and things like that. So versus the 5% that we can offer, a lot of local authorities are deciding to use that power. So it's a really good collaborative time, because that can compensate for the feed-in tariff. And we're doing that far more with councils right now, as well as kind of providing additional services with the education. But they really like it because it's integrating that long-term education with students and looking ahead, as well as developing solar PV projects. So they like the two. So I think it's actually a really good opportunity for collaboration post-FIT, actually.
Great. And have there been any issues with the conversion to academies? How many academies do you work with, for instance, as opposed to traditional schools?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a really good mix of kind of maintained academies, diocese and independents. The good thing about the conversion process and how our model works is that because the Community Benefit Society is the owner of the panels, it doesn't matter if the school goes through an academisation process, because they don't have to handle kind of changes of ownership or anything like that. So it's just about liaising with the school through that process and working out what they want to do with the panels. But the ownership and all the legal things around it are absolutely fine. I think there's definitely some barriers with specific barriers with academies, in terms of the Department for Education recently kind of blocking some solar PV projects. So that is definitely, it's definitely a barrier because they have kind of the lease agreement and can do that. But we're working with the DFE and we've recently kind of got more progress on that front, and some schools have been offered the go ahead where it was blocked before. So short answer, yes and no, but it's looking increasingly like academies are not a problem.
Fantastic, thank you. And yeah, just touching on the Department for Education point, this is something that Community Energy England have been working on with a lot of fervour recently. I can't really go into the details of this. It's not been something I've been working on, but yeah, there have been complications, but we are hoping to find a way around some of these lease issues. I'm just going to quickly comment. I mean, one of my favourite things about solar for schools is just the name of the panelizer. I mean, that is absolutely fantastic, and I think a lot of people should be able to use that. That's great. So I'm going to wrap up now. I think it's really important that we keep these events succinct, and if you come to future ones, it's going to be on time. All right, we're a minute over, but you know what I mean. So thank you very much to all of our speakers. I found this truly inspiring and motivating. I indeed feel we are on fertile ground in Yorkshire. And as I said, this is the first event in a series, so keep your eyes open for future events. We are exploring how to create a formal ish hub in the region. We're just testing the waters, seeing what sort of appetite there is. At first, we'll keep doing this, focusing on sharing stories, ideas, and promoting partnerships. I'm so pleased that there seems to be people willing to collaborate already based on this call. So let's see where we can take this. If you're interested in getting involved further, please do get in touch. A reminder about the Bradford Community Energy Share offer that's open. That's www.bcel.org. Okay, let's wrap this up. So here's to peace, solidarity, energy efficiency, and tons of renewables.